Heavens, these games prove that story, immersion, and unforgettable moments still matter today. Every game on this list has something special. Some will wreck you emotionally, others will blow your mind. I've played them all and brought you the real deal, personal experience to what players has to say. This remaster brings back the original 2015 emotional rollercoaster with updated visuals and character animations. If you've never played the original, this is the best way to experience Max and Chloe's journey. Here's the truth. The remastered visuals are better, yes, but not by a huge leap. Some facial expressions are still awkward, and the lip sync can feel off. But what makes the game special is still intact: the slow burn emotional story, the music, the atmosphere, and the time rewind mechanic. It's a game that connects with you personally. I replayed it recently, and even though the visuals were hit or miss, the story still had a powerful effect. So if you're all about story-rich experiences and don't mind slow pacing, this is still a gem. Just don't expect a full-blown remake. It's more of a polished re-release. Now, let's crank up the intensity, because the next game throws you into chaos with no second chances. Returnal recently dropped on PC, and it's one of the most intense single-player experiences I've had. You crash land on an alien planet stuck in a time loop, and every run is brutally punishing, but incredibly rewarding. Playing this game is like controlled chaos. The bullet hell action mixed with roguelite progression had me on edge constantly. The PC port runs smoothly now, thankfully, after a few patches. But I won't lie, Returnal is not for everyone. It's hard, sometimes frustrating, and if you hate losing progress, you'll rage quit. But if you stick with it, the story slowly unravels and becomes mind-bending in the best way. Critics in 2025 still praise its combat and world design, but yeah, the story is vague and open-ended, which may not sit well with everyone. It's one of those love it or leave it games. If you're into action with a psychological twist and you enjoy a good challenge, Returnal delivers. Now, speaking of action and story, the next game blends both in the galaxy far, far away. Even in 2025, this game still holds up incredibly well. You play as Cal Kestis, a young Jedi trying to survive after Order 66, and the story is one of the best Star Wars narratives in a game. I played this recently again, and it's still a blast. The combat is like a mix of Dark Souls-like and Uncharted-style traversal. What makes it work is the balance. It's challenging, but not punishing. Some of the platforming can get clunky, and the map system is still a mess, but the emotional journey is real. Critics this year still mention how it does Star Wars justice. Great characters, solid pacing, and impressive visuals. If you're a Star Wars fan, this is a must, and if you're not, it's still a great third-person action game with depth and style. Now let's go from space fantasy to a futuristic world that was once a disaster, but is now one of the greatest comebacks in gaming history. Back in 2020, Cyberpunk launched in a broken state. But in 2025, after years of updates and the Phantom Liberty expansion, it's finally what it was meant to be, and more. I played the latest version, and honestly, it blew me away. The world feels alive now. The bugs are mostly gone, the police system is improved, and the story is still one of the best in sci-fi gaming. Keanu Reeves and Idris Elba's performances carry weight, and the choices you make actually matter, but it's not perfect. Some side quests can feel shallow, and AI still has awkward moments. Also, CDPR's upgrade path wasn't super friendly to last-gen players. That said, this is now a top-tier RPG that finally delivers on its promise. If you skipped it before, now is the time to jump in. Next up, let's leave the neon lights behind and explore a strange, beautiful universe where time works a little differently. Outer Wilds is one of those games that feels like it was made to surprise you. You play as an astronaut stuck in a 22-minute time loop, trying to figure out why the universe keeps ending. It's weird, deep, and super creative. I played this game recently, and man, I can confidently say it's not like anything else. You don't fight enemies, you explore, and every discovery feels earned. The mystery keeps pulling you in, and by the end, I was actually emotional. The game got a 2025 boost with its next-gen patch, and reviews are still glowing. But be warned, it's not for everyone. There's no hand-holding, and some puzzles can feel overwhelming or confusing. If you're not into reading or slow-paced exploration, you'll bounce off quickly. But if you love games that make you think and reward curiosity, Outer Wilds is a must-play. It's a slow burn, but the payoff is unforgettable. Now, let's jump into something more massive and explosive, one of the biggest JRPGs of recent times. This game had the pressure of living up to a legend, and honestly, it does. Final Fantasy VII. Rebirth expands the story with a bigger world, deeper combat, and emotional moments that hit hard, even if you know what's coming. I played it at launch, and yeah, it's not perfect, but it's epic. The open areas feel alive. The combat is a step above the last game, and the way they mix old memories with new twists is amazing. 2025 reviews agree. It's polished, packed with content, and full of heart. The downside? It drags in some places, and the minigames, let's just say not all of them are fun. Also, if you didn't play the first remake, you'll be lost. Still, as a single-player experience, this is one of the most thrilling RPG rides of the generation. And speaking of thrilling, the next game is literally the future of VR storytelling. Even in 2025, Half-Life Alyx is still the best reason to own a VR headset. Set before Half-Life 2, this game puts you in Alyx's shoes as she fights against the Combine in a world that's as immersive as VR gets. Playing it felt like stepping into a real place. The way you reload, the way you explore, the voice acting, it all feels alive. Critics in 2025 still consider this the gold standard for VR. But here's the catch, it's VR only, and you need a decent setup to enjoy it smoothly. That alone limits the audience, which sucks because it's truly something special. Also, if you're expecting fast-paced shooting all the time, this isn't it. The pacing is slower and it leans more on atmosphere. But if you've got a headset, Alyx is a must. It's not just a game, it's an experience. Now let's shift gears and head into the Pokemon world with one of the boldest spins on the formula. This game broke the traditional Pokemon formula in the best way. It gave us a more open-world experience with faster catching, real-time dodging, and a world that actually feels alive, at least in gameplay terms. When I played it, I was surprised how fun and fresh it felt. Sneaking through grass, tossing Pokeballs, and getting chased by wild monsters was pure joy. But I'll be honest, graphically, it looks like a mobile game from 2012. The textures are rough, the world can feel empty, and the performance dips are real. 2025 reviews still praise its gameplay loop, but visuals and polish remain major complaints. Still, if you're a long-time Pokemon fan and want something different, this is a refreshing change. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. And if you think Pokemon is weird, wait till you try the next one. It's all about diving deep into someone's mind. Psychonauts 2 is a wild ride through dreams, trauma, and imagination. You play as Raz, a young psychic exploring twisted mental worlds, and it's one of the most creative games I've ever played. What stood out to me wasn't just the platforming, which is tight and fun, but the story. It handles serious topics like anxiety and grief with surprising care. The level design is brilliant. No two levels are alike. 2025 reviews still call it one of the smartest and most underrated games out there. On the downside, the combat is just okay, and not every joke lands. Also, some players might find the pacing a bit slow in parts, but overall, this game has heart, humor, and style. It's not your typical platformer, it's something more meaningful. Alright, next up, we head into space once again, but this time with a heavy focus on dialogue, decisions, and dark humor. Imagine a universe where mega corporations colonize distant planets, and your choices dictate the fate of entire settlements. Welcome to the Outer Worlds, Obsidian Entertainment's satirical take on space exploration and corporate greed. Diving into the Outer Worlds felt like stepping into a darkly comedic space opera. The game's strength lies in its branching narratives and witty dialogue. Every decision impacts the storyline, making each playthrough unique. The companions are memorable, each with their own backstories and motivations, adding depth to the journey. However, the game isn't without its flaws. While the worlds are vibrant and filled with quirky characters, some areas felt underdeveloped, leaving a craving for more exploration. The combat mechanics, though functional, lacked the depth found in other RPGs, making encounters feel repetitive over time. If you're seeking a narrative-driven RPG with a satirical edge, The Outer Worlds delivers. Its engaging story and character interactions overshadow its minor shortcomings, making it a worthy addition to any single-player adventure list. From the satirical reaches of space, let's descend into the eerie corridors of a zombie-infested city in our next game. A reimagining of the 1998 classic Resident Evil 2 remake plunges players into Raccoon City, where a viral outbreak has transformed its inhabitants into terrifying creatures. Survival horror has rarely been this intense. Playing as either Leon S. Kennedy or Claire Redfield, the game offers two distinct perspectives, each unraveling different facets of the overarching narrative. The atmosphere is thick with tension. Dimly lit hallways, distant groans, and the ever-present threat of the relentless tyrant keep players on edge. The over-the-shoulder wide-shoulder camera modernizes the experience, making aiming and movement more intuitive. However, this perspective also amplifies the horror, as threats can emerge from blind spots, leading to genuine jump scares. Inventory management remains crucial, harking back to the series' roots, forcing players to make strategic decisions about which items to carry. Yet some criticisms persist. The game's reliance on backtracking can occasionally disrupt pacing, and certain puzzles feel more like fillers than integral components of the story. Additionally, while the AI of regular zombies is commendable, the tyrant's scripted appearances can sometimes feel predictable. Resident Evil 2 Remake masterfully balances nostalgia with modern gameplay enhancements. It's a testament to how remakes should be approached, offering both longtime fans and newcomers a harrowing yet rewarding experience. Swinging from the horrors of Raccoon City, we find ourselves soaring through the vibrant streets of New York with a new web-slinging hero. Step into the sneakers of Miles Morales as he embraces his role as New York's newest Spider-Man. With unique powers and a city in turmoil, Miles' journey is both personal and heroic. From the moment I took control of Miles, the game exuded a fresh energy distinct from its predecessor. The snowy streets of Harlem, combined with a pulsating soundtrack, set the stage for a culturally rich narrative. Miles' bioelectric venom attacks and camouflage abilities introduce new combat dynamics, making engagements feel novel and exhilarating. The story delves deep into themes of community, identity, and responsibility. Miles' relationships, especially with his mother and best friend Ganke, are portrayed with authenticity, grounding the superhero tale in relatable human experiences. However, the game's length is a double-edged sword. While the concise narrative ensures a tight, engaging experience, it leaves some character arcs underexplored. Additionally, the side missions, though entertaining, lack the depth that would encourage prolonged engagement post-main story. Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales is a vibrant, heartfelt addition to the Spider-Man universe. It captures the essence of the character while introducing fresh elements that make it stand out. Though brief, Miles' adventure is one that resonates long after the credits roll. Leaving the bustling streets of New York, we venture into a fantastical realm where reality and metaphor intertwine. From the creators of the Persona series comes Metaphor ReFantazio, an RPG that melds intricate storytelling with a richly imagined fantasy world. Embarking on this journey, I was immediately struck by the game's unique art direction. The landscapes are dreamlike, and character designs exude a distinct flair that sets it apart from typical fantasy RPGs. The turn-based combat system is both strategic and fluid, with the archetype system allowing for diverse character customization and tactical depth. The narrative is where Metaphor ReFantazio truly shines. It weaves political intrigue with personal stories, creating a tapestry that's both grand and intimate. The game's themes resonate deeply, exploring societal structures and individual agency. Yet it's not without its drawbacks. The complex UI, while stylish, can be overwhelming, especially during intense battles. Some players might find the pacing uneven, with certain segments feeling drawn out. Metaphor ReFantazio is a bold step in RPG design, offering a narrative-rich experience complemented by deep gameplay mechanics. It's a journey that challenges conventions and rewards players willing to immerse themselves fully. From fantastical realms, we return to a post-apocalyptic landscape where survival hinges on the choices you make. In the irradiated Mojave Desert, Fallout New Vegas offers players a chance to shape the destiny of New Vegas through alliances, betrayals, and moral quandaries. Venturing through the Mojave, the game's open-ended nature is both its strength and weakness. The freedom to align with various factions, each with its own ideologies, provides a tailored experience. The writing is sharp, filled with dark humor and philosophical undertones that prompt reflection. However, the game's age is evident. Graphically, it feels dated, and technical issues, including frequent bugs and crashes, mar the experience. Combat mechanics are clunky compared to modern standards, making some encounters more frustrating than challenging. Despite its technical shortcomings, Fallout New Vegas remains a standout in the RPG genre. Its narrative depth and player agency set a benchmark that few games have matched. For those willing to overlook its flaws, it offers an experience that's both thought-provoking and immersive. As we leave the desolate wastelands behind, our next adventure takes us into the mind of a troubled writer battling both inner and outer demons. If you love psychological horror with deep storytelling, Alan Wake 2 is a wild ride you don't want to miss. It mixes survival horror with a strong cinematic style that feels like you're trapped in a twisted mystery novel. I've played this one recently, and honestly, it blew me away. The atmosphere is incredibly intense, and the dual narrative between Alan and Saga keeps things fresh. Visually, the game looks stunning, especially on next-gen hardware. But here's the thing, it's not for everyone. The pacing can be slow, and the puzzle solving feels dragged out at times. Combat is tighter than the first game, but still not its strongest point. It's more about mood and story than action. Some bugs and performance hiccups were still present even after patches, which is a letdown for a premium-priced game in 2025. Still, if you're into creepy vibes, layered storytelling, and a game that challenges your brain more than your reflexes, this one hits different. And if you thought that was dark, wait till you dive into a world where freedom and curiosity lead the way. Next up, let's talk about Zelda: Breath of the Wild. This isn't just a Zelda game, it's a full-on adventure playground. Breath of the Wild throws you into a massive open world and simply says, figure it out. And that's where the magic begins. As someone who's spent hours getting lost in Hyrule, I can say the sense of freedom is unmatched. Climb any mountain, glide across valleys, cook weird recipes, everything is designed to let your curiosity lead. That said, combat does feel a little too simple over time, and weapon durability is still frustrating even in 2025. Yes, they had the chance to patch or tweak it for modern re-releases, but they didn't. The story is fine, not amazing, but it's the exploration that truly shines. And even now, the visuals hold up beautifully thanks to the art style, even if it's not graphically top tier. Breath of the Wild is still the gold standard for open world design. It's not perfect, but it's honest, creative, and incredibly fun in its own way. Speaking of gods and epic journeys, the next game is a brutal, heartfelt battle between a father and son. Let's talk about God of War. God of War isn't just a reboot, it's a complete reimagining that somehow respects the original and yet feels brand new. The shift from angry chaos to quiet fatherhood adds serious emotional depth. I recently revisited this with the 2025 PS5 patch, and wow, it still hits hard. Combat is weighty, with the Leviathan axe feeling powerful every time you throw it. Kratos' bond with Atreus is what makes this game special. You care, you really do. The story is deep and the pacing is tight, though a few backtracking moments can feel repetitive. Side quests are hit or miss, but the main story carries everything. Some camera angles during fights can get annoying, especially in tighter areas. And while exploration is there, it's pretty guided. Don't expect an open world like Zelda. It's a bold, brutal game with a lot of heart. If you're looking for a cinematic experience that blends action with emotion, this one is a must. Now, if you're ready to swap Norse gods for dark dice rolls and endless choices, you're gonna love what's next: Baldur's Gate 3. This isn't just a video game, it's a full-on Dungeons & Dragons campaign where your decisions actually matter. Baldur's Gate 3 is complex, creative, and sometimes completely chaotic in the best way. I've played through it, and honestly, no two players will have the same experience. The characters feel alive, the choices are meaningful, and the story branches more than most RPGs dream of. The turn-based combat might not be for everyone. It's slow and strategic, but if you're into thinking before swinging, it's gold. That said, Act 3 still suffers from performance issues even in 2025, especially on lower-end systems, and the UI can feel clunky during intense moments. Also, the learning curve is steep for new players, but man, when it clicks, it really clicks. It's the kind of game that rewards patience and experimentation. And just when you think gaming can't get more cinematic, Machine Games steps in with a whip, a pistol, and a fedora. Let's talk Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Finally, a game that actually makes you feel like Indiana Jones. The Great Circle blends first-person action with old-school treasure hunting vibes, all wrapped in a pulpy 1930s adventure tone. I gave this one a go recently, and while the story pulls you in with classic indie charm, the gameplay is where it gets mixed. The puzzles are fun and make you feel clever, but the action can be a little stiff. Combat doesn't always feel smooth, especially in close quarters, and enemy AI is a bit too basic for 2025 standards. Visually, it looks great, and the environments are detailed, but the linear level design might feel too old school for some players used to open world freedom. Still, the storytelling is solid, and Harrison Ford's digital double gives it that authentic flavor. It's not perfect, but if you're a fan of cinematic adventures, this game definitely scratches that classic adventure itch. Now trade your whip for a sword and prepare to die, again and again. Elden Ring is up next. Elden Ring doesn't hold your hand. It grabs you by the face and throws you into a brutal, beautiful world with almost no direction. And honestly, that's why it's so special. I played it again recently, and the magic is still there. The freedom is unmatched, the boss fights are epic, and the world feels alive in a dark, haunting way. From Software really nailed the balance between mystery and reward. But let's be real, this game is not for everyone. The difficulty is punishing, and even in 2025, some balancing issues remain, especially in PvP and late game scaling. The story is buried under cryptic lore, and if you're not into piecing together vague clues, you might feel lost. Plus, performance isn't perfect on all platforms, especially with visual pop-ins. Still, for those who crave a challenge and love exploring dark fantasy worlds, Elden Ring is a masterpiece that keeps calling you back. Next up, we trade cursed lands for wild frontiers. Let's head into the heart of the West with Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead Redemption 2 is more than a game. It's a world that breathes. From the sound of the wind in the trees to every side character's backstory, this Wild West journey is Rockstar's most detailed work yet. I returned to this game in 2025, and it still holds up like a modern masterpiece. The story is emotionally heavy, and Arthur Morgan is one of the best written characters in gaming. Every mission feels like it matters. But I won't lie, the game can be too slow at times. The controls are clunky, and small actions like looting or picking up items feel way more complicated than they need to be. The online mode is sadly neglected, with almost no major updates since 2022, which feels like a wasted opportunity. But if you're here for the story and world building, it's an unforgettable ride. Now let's leave the dusty trails behind and step into a future filled with robot dinosaurs and gorgeous sunsets. Horizon Forbidden West is next. If you ever wanted to fight robot dinosaurs with a bow in a post-apocalyptic world full of color, Horizon Forbidden West delivers exactly that, and then some. I played the PS5 version recently, and it's still one of the best-looking games out there. The world is massive and full of life. Aloy remains a strong, likable protagonist, and the variety of weapons and combat strategies keeps things fun. But let's be honest, the story doesn't hit as hard this time. There are too many characters and subplots, and the pacing often drags in the middle. Plus, there are still bugs. Enemy AI acts weird sometimes, and facial animations in dialogue scenes feel stiff for a 2025 title. Exploration is rewarding but can get repetitive if you're chasing every marker. Despite its flaws, it's an exciting and visually stunning open-world adventure that deserves your time. From machines to mankind's darkest moments, up next is the haunting and controversial The Last of Us Part 2. Few games have sparked as much debate as The Last of Us Part 2. It's brutal, emotional, and incredibly bold. Whether you love it or hate it, this game makes you feel something, and not many can say that. I revisited it with the 2025 PS5 remaster, and it still hits hard. The visuals are top tier, the sound design is terrifyingly real, and the combat feels smooth and satisfying. But the story, it's rough. The narrative choices, especially around certain key characters, still divide fans. The pacing also suffers in the middle, dragging during Abby's chapters. It tries to say a lot about revenge and empathy, but not all of it lands cleanly. Still, the acting, animations, and set pieces are on another level. If you can handle its emotional weight, it's a powerful experience. And now, let's end this journey with a true RPG legend, The Witcher 3. Wild Hunt is like a fine wine. It keeps getting better with age. With the 2025 next-gen update, it's now smoother, prettier, and even more immersive than ever before. I've spent hundreds of hours with Geralt, and this latest version makes it even easier to get lost in its dark, rich world. The writing is top tier, the quests are meaningful, and the world feels alive. The Blood and Wine DLC alone could be its own game. But it's not perfect. Some controls still feel outdated, and combat can get repetitive if you don't experiment. Even now, a few bugs pop up, especially in crowded towns. And let's not forget, the inventory system is still clunky despite years of complaints. But honestly, these are minor issues compared to the storytelling, world design, and choices that really matter. And that wraps it up. 10 unforgettable single-player adventures that all offer something unique, flaws and all. And if this video has helped you find your game, check out the channel. I post new videos every day, breaking down even more hidden gems and upcoming games you might have missed. Whether you're into deep stories, challenging combat, or just pure exploration, there's something here for every kind of gamer.